It happened in a courtroom packed with people. One moment she was standing quietly beside her lawyer. The next, two officers had her by the arms. "Ma'am, you're disturbing the court," one barked. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't fighting. She had only whispered, "That's not the truth." But that whisper was enough. They grabbed her, right there in front of her child. Her boy reached for her, crying, "Mama!" The judge slammed the gavel, bam, and said, "Remove her!" Every phone in the room was recording. And as the cops dragged her across the marble floor, people whispered, "Why are they doing this? She didn't do anything." She turned her head just once before the doors closed. There was no fear in her eyes, only something deeper, a promise. Because nobody in that room knew who she really was and what she was about to become. Seconds later, those same courtroom doors opened again. And when she walked back in, she wasn't the defendant anymore. She was the judge. They said justice was blind. But that day, it sure looked the other way. The courtroom was cold, polished, echoing every sound. A woman's quiet breathing, the shuffle of a child's shoes. Then, chaos. Two officers grabbed a black woman by the arms. Hard, too hard. She screamed, "Get your hands off me!" But nobody moved. Her purse hit the marble floor. Papers scattered everywhere like falling leaves. The gavel slammed. Order in the court. But there was no order. Not for her. Her little boy stood near the benches, frozen, eyes wide with fear. "Mommy!" he cried. No one helped. Not the lawyer she trusted, not the people sitting there pretending not to see. The doors burst open as the officers dragged her out. The crowd stared. Some whispered, some smiled. And when those heavy oak doors slammed shut, the sound echoed like a sentence. Nobody in that room knew that the same woman they just dragged away would walk back through those same doors. And when she did, she wouldn't be begging for justice. She'd be justice. Her name was Marcia Daniels, 32 years old, a single mother. She worked nights cleaning offices downtown, came home to help her son with homework, and dreamed, just dreamed, of a fair chance. She'd spent her whole life believing in rules, in fairness, in doing things the right way. But in her city, rules only seemed to protect the ones wearing badges or black robes. That morning, she wasn't in court as a criminal. She was there as a mother. Her landlord had evicted her without warning, thrown her things on the street, even with her child's medicine still inside. She'd filed a complaint, begged for a hearing, and somehow the hearing turned into this. Her landlord's lawyer smirked from across the room. Her public defender kept checking his phone. And the judge, he barely looked at her. "Mrs. Daniels," he said, voice flat, "you've been disruptive before. Don't test my patience today." She stood, trembling but calm. "Your Honor," she said, "I have proof that my landlord—" Before she could finish, one of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, sit down." She turned toward him. "I just want to show—" The officer grabbed her arm. She gasped. "Let go." Then came the moment the cameras would later replay again and again. The moment the world would never forget. The officer twisted her wrist, spun her around, and slammed her against the rail. Gasps filled the courtroom. Her son screamed. "Remove her!" the judge barked. "Mommy!" the boy shouted. The officers dragged her out. The doors slammed. Silence. That's where most stories end for people like her. But this one was only beginning. Outside the courthouse, Marcia sat on the concrete steps, her hands still shaking, wrists red. Her son sat beside her, silent. People passed without looking. Some whispered words she could feel but couldn't hear. She looked at her boy. "You okay, baby?" He nodded, eyes wet. "Why they do that to you, Mama?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stared at those courthouse doors, and something in her eyes changed. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper. For years, Marcia had hidden part of who she was. People thought she was just another janitor, another mother struggling to make it. They didn't know she had once been a law student, a good one. She'd dropped out when she got pregnant, chose to raise her son instead of chasing degrees. But she never stopped studying, never stopped reading case law during her breaks, never stopped believing that one day, justice might call her name again. And maybe that day had come. Inside the courthouse, rumors started spreading. "Did you see that woman get dragged out?" one clerk whispered. "She should have known better," another said. But down the hall, an older bailiff frowned. "You don't know who that was, do you?" They didn't, not yet. Because while they whispered, Marcia was already moving. Not home, not to hide. She walked around the building to another entrance, the same one judges used. She knew that building better than most. She'd cleaned every floor of it for 5 years. She knew which elevator didn't need a key card, which hallway connected to the judicial chambers. And more importantly, she knew the law, every word of it. The next few minutes felt like a blur. Marcia walked down the hallway, the echo of her footsteps mixing with the sound of her own heartbeat. Every door she passed had once been just another surface to polish, another knob to wipe clean. But today, it was different. She wasn't cleaning anymore. She was walking towards something she had been waiting for her whole life. A door opened up ahead, the judge's chambers. Inside, the very judge who had ordered her out of court sat in his chair, sipping coffee, laughing with the landlord's attorney. They didn't even notice her at first. When they finally did, the laughter stopped cold. "Mrs. Daniels?" the judge stammered. "You can't be in here." Marcia didn't answer. She just looked at him, the same way he'd looked at her moments earlier, like she wasn't supposed to exist. The attorney sneered. "You people never learn, do you?" Marcia's eyes shifted to a folder sitting on the desk. Her name was on it, her case file. She picked it up slowly, like it belonged belonged to her, because it did. This case isn't over, she said quietly. The judge rose from his seat. Officer, he shouted, but no one came. Not yet, because something else was happening, something no one in that room understood. That morning, before the hearing, an envelope had arrived in the courthouse mailroom. It was marked Federal Appointment Notice. Inside, it was a new judicial confirmation letter. A temporary substitute judge had been assigned to the district due to an emergency rotation, and the name printed on that letter was Marcia Daniels. The judge stared at her in disbelief. This is impossible, he muttered. Marcia placed the letter on the desk in front of him. It's official, she said. The system you thought you owned just corrected itself. The attorney took a step back. This can't be real. Marcia turned toward him. You forged my eviction documents. You lied under oath. You thought no one would ever hold you accountable. She paused, her voice calm but sharp. Now sit down. Court is back in session. When the courtroom doors opened again, the crowd fell silent. Everyone expected officers. Instead, they saw her, the same woman who'd been dragged out, walking back in. But this time, she wasn't in handcuffs. She was wearing the black robe. A hush spread across the room. The clerk looked confused. The bailiff froze mid-step. Even the child, her son, stared, eyes wide, whispering, "Mama?" She gave him a small smile. Then she turned toward the bench. The old judge stood there, pale, holding his coat. He knew what was happening, but he didn't want to believe it. Marcia looked at him one last time. "I'll take it from here," she said. He left without a word. Marcia took her seat. The gavel felt heavy in her hand, but right. The courtroom that once humiliated her was now her courtroom. She looked around. The same people who had whispered about her now stared in silence. The officers who dragged her out stood stiff by the wall, unsure whether to move. Her landlord sat in the front row, color drained from his face. Marcia's voice was steady. "Let's resume this case." The clerk, still stunned, began reading. "Case number 2741, Daniels versus Moretti Housing Group." Marcia nodded. "Proceed," she said. Every word she spoke carried the weight of every injustice she'd endured. The weight of every mother who'd ever been silenced. As testimony unfolded, truths began to surface. Forgery, false reports, bribes. The very system that had failed her was now revealing itself piece by piece, in her courtroom, under her watch. And for the first time in years, Marcia felt something powerful. Not revenge, not pride, but balance. The gavel struck, and the sound that once symbolized her humiliation now carried her justice. But it wasn't over yet. Outside that courtroom, word had spread fast. News outlets were calling it the Miracle Judge story. Crowds gathered on the courthouse steps, holding signs, cheering her name. Yet Marcia knew the real fight had just begun. Because justice, real justice, isn't just about a title. It's about what you do when you finally hold the power. She looked out at the crowd through the chamber window. The same people who once looked away now looked up, and she whispered to herself, "They'll never look away again." For a long moment, the courtroom stayed silent. The kind of silence that only comes when everyone in the room knows they're witnessing something they'll never forget. Marcia sat high above them now, but she didn't gloat. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. The robe didn't change who she was. It only gave shape to what she had always carried inside. "Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice echoing, "you stand accused of falsifying housing documents, violating state safety codes, and threatening tenants who tried to speak up. Do you deny these charges?" He swallowed hard. I was just following procedure." "Procedure," she repeated softly. "The same word you used when you threw my child's medication in the trash." He tried to speak, but the words stuck. The crowd shifted. The same people who had once watched her get dragged away now leaned forward, eyes fixed on the woman in the black robe. "Your Honor," his lawyer started. "Surely this is—" Marcia raised a hand. "Sit down, counsel. Today we're not twisting the law to fit power. We're using it to uncover truth." The room held its breath. She read the evidence, line by line. The forged signatures, the fake maintenance reports, the text messages threatening tenants to stay silent. By the time she finished, the landlord's face was pale. "Mr. Moretti," she said, "you'll return every dollar you stole, and you'll do it publicly." Court adjourned. The gavel came down. The crowd erupted, but Marcia didn't smile. She turned to the officers standing near the doors, the same two who had dragged her out hours before. Their eyes were down. "Officers," she said, "step forward." They obeyed, shoulders tense. "Do you know what justice means?" she asked quietly. One of them, younger, whispered, "Doing what's right. Even when it's hard," she added. "Even when it's not popular. Even when it means looking in the mirror." They nodded. She didn't shout, didn't humiliate. She simply said, "Let this day remind you that a uniform isn't a license to forget humanity." The younger one met her gaze, eyes wet. "Yes, Your Honor." Marcia looked back at her son in the gallery. He was smiling for the first time that day. She smiled back. "Come here, baby." He ran up, clutching her hand. "Mama, you really a judge?" She knelt down, pulled him close. "I'm still your mama first." The crowd watched, some clapping, some crying. That night, the headlines spread everywhere. "Dragged out of court, returns as judge." But to Marcia, it wasn't a headline. It was closure. She went home to her small apartment, sat by the window, window and looked at the city lights. Her son slept on the couch beside her. For years, she had been cleaning offices, scrubbing floors, erasing other people's footprints. Now finally, she had left one of her own. She thought of all the people who would never sit on a bench, who would never hold a gavel, but who fought every day for dignity. And she whispered, "This is for them." Weeks later, she presided over her first full docket. No fanfare, no cameras, just people, ordinary people coming to be heard. She listened to each case with the same patience she had begged for all her life. One woman came in crying over an eviction. Marcia leaned forward, gentle but firm. "Show me your papers," she said. This time, the papers mattered. By the end of that week, the courthouse staff began to notice something new. The air felt different. People spoke softer. Lawyers watched their tone. The same officers who once barked orders now said, "Yes, ma'am." Justice had taken a new shape in that courtroom, and it had a name, Marcia Daniels. Months passed. The noise faded. Life went on. But whenever a new case landed on her desk, she would pause before she signed the order, because she remembered what it felt like to be on the other side of that desk, and she never wanted anyone to feel that powerless again. One rainy evening, the bailiff knocked on her office door. "Judge Daniels," he said, "there's someone asking for you." "Who is it?" He smiled. "The landlord." She raised an eyebrow. "Send him in." Mr. Moretti stepped in quietly, hat in his hands. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry," he muttered, "for everything." Marcia studied him for a long moment. "Do better," she said. "That's all the apology I need." He nodded and left. As the door closed, Marcia leaned back in her chair. The gavel sat on her desk, polished, gleaming in the dim light. She smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Because justice, she realized, wasn't revenge. It was restoration. The next morning, as the sun poured through the courthouse windows, she walked past the bench and stood where she had once been dragged away. She closed her eyes and whispered, "We made it." For a second, she could almost hear her late mother's voice. Soft, proud, unbroken. "Keep standing, baby. No matter how many times they try to pull you down." Marcia opened her eyes, took a breath, and stepped back toward the bench. Court was in session again, and this time, justice had a face.